Hi, this is Kimball Bullington, and this is Lean Project Management. And let's take a quick look at an overview of the course. We'll be looking in general at what is project management, looking at distinguishing between management or project management for professional project managers versus project management for the rest of us. And we'll be contrasting some tools. We'll be looking at Excel versus Microsoft Project. We'll be bringing in a third tool set, which is Project Libre, which is a lot like Microsoft Project, but it's free. And then we'll be looking at the phases of project management, which are based on the Project Management Institute. We'll be using them as sort of our authority on project management. What is a project? It's a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And an example of that would be the Apollo moon landing in 1963 at a speech in Houston to Rice University, or at Rice University. President Kennedy said, "We choose to go to the moon, and we choose to land a man safely on the moon and bring him safely back by the end of the decade." That was a project. And even though we landed more than one Apollo, it still wasn't really in the form of production. Every one of those landings was a project, though a related project. How do we choose projects? Well, we want projects that are important. They're important enough for us to commit money or resources, time to them. If it's not challenging, then it's really not a project. If it's a just do it sort of task, then it's not a project. Is it achievable? Can it be done? And we may not even know how it can be done yet, but we should have some confidence that it can be done, technically, economically, politically, and practically. And then timely, can it finish in a reasonable time? And of course, reasonable is going to vary by the project. We're going to look at projects this semester. I want each of you to do a project, complete a project in 12 weeks. What type of project would that look like? So we need one that's completed this term, and it may be a significant part of a larger project that cannot be completed during the 12 weeks. We have to define it such that we can complete it, or at least we believe we can. What if you fail to complete it? Then we learn from the mistakes, and that becomes part of your report at the end, or presentation at the end. Companies and individuals are often evaluated on a quarter basis, so 12 weeks is the sort of project you could complete in a quarter. There's a lot of these projects, and we can divide them up into weekly or maybe bi-weekly or even longer scrums during that period of time. So some examples for projects. So you could be developing a workshop or a course, training or launching training that you have had that done this summer by some students. You could be developing a marketing plan. You could be developing a new product. Probably not a really complex product during that time, but you could complete a product development. You could be selecting a supplier. You could be rehabilitating a supplier or developing a supplier. These are some examples of projects that could be completed during a 12-week time frame. So some examples: capital equipment purchase, writing a book. I actually intended this summer to write a book as my project until one of my advisors talked me out of it, basically not because he didn't think I could do it, but because he thought I had other projects that were more timely. And if not a book, perhaps you're writing a chapter in a book. You could be developing a skill. One of my projects in a past course was learning to play the guitar. Of course, I had to define what that meant in order to make it fit. Some sort of bucket list event plan. And actually, that's the project that I'm working on this fall. So the project I will be working, probably slightly ahead of your project, will be planning a bicycle trip across America. A bicycle trip across America is something I've wanted to do for a long time. And I believe that I can do it. I don't believe I can wait much longer if I'm going to do it. I can't do it in 12 weeks while teaching classes, but I could plan it during that time. And so, as it turns out, even planning a trip across America can be a significant project. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Here I've unfortunately still got the right book highlighted. I'm going to plan an across the America bicycle trip. And so here in the initial phase, the initiate phase, we're going to define what is the need or problem or waste. We're going to look a little bit at how do we choose between projects. How will we solve this problem? What is the scope? In other words, how we set boundaries around the project. I want it to include all of these tasks, but maybe not these tasks that are out here. So sometimes in scope we define what is in scope, and we also define what is not in scope. So for instance, I'm scoping my bicycle trip as a multi-year trip, not as a single trip across America in one year. Determine the cost, the delivery, meaning the timing, and then draft the charter. And every project has, this is sometimes called the iron triangle or triple constraint. And if I decide to change one of these, so for instance I decide to decrease the cost, then it's likely I'm going to be increasing the time or decreasing the scope as well. I'm going to be doing something to these other two factors. So if we thought about quality, and I define that maybe as, I said I want it good, I want it to meet the customer expectations, low defect rate, we can do this. I want it fast, and we'll talk more about the importance of fast projects later, and efficient. So, but the trade-offs are reality. So a little bit of exposure to a project management landscape, and we tend to be linear. The traditional model is scope, plan, launch, monitor, control, and close the project. But the fact is, we don't define it all up front usually. So maybe we have still linear, but we have incremental approach. Or in a more agile approach, we don't even try to scope the whole project. We just we scope an iteration, and then we do the iteration, or we plan a cycle and we adjust to that. That's really how things work. Some of you are going to be really pleased with yourself early on in the project and your planning and say, wow, this is a great tool. But then you're going to get into the project, implementing it, and you'll find, that plan that I made, I'm not completely following it. Well, that's to be expected. The planning is still valuable because it gets us farther down the road than we would be if we did not plan. But do not expect all plans to survive your project unaltered. So where do projects come from? Known problems or opportunities, quite often they're just sitting out there. You're struggling with something already. Client requests, a corporate initiative, mandated requirements, which could be a governmental or regulatory mandate. It could be a management mandate. Inherited projects, environmental changes. When I say environmental changes, or when I say environment, usually in this course, I'm talking about factors outside of your system that affect your system, but they're beyond your control. So we're not just talking about weather. We could be talking about a political environment, an economic environment, a social environment, a technological environment. So all of those are environmental changes. When we talk about lean project management, then we're looking at projects in a context of lean, a perspective of lean. And lean, one aspect of lean is just learning to see wastes, wastes that are around us all the time, defect waste, and we want to reduce these wastes. We're going to use a charter. And we're going to operationally define terms when we need to, which means I'm going to define them in ways that someone else can use the definition and work with it. We're going to use to some extent the breakthrough strategy, which is DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control, or DMADV, which is if you're developing a new product, which is define, measure, analyze, design, and verify or validate. We have an extensive toolkit that we're going to depend upon, and I'm going to train you, if you don't already know them, I'm going to train you in a number of tools as we go through the course. Six Sigma has belts that sort of identify different training, which is sort of a cool thing. The 7 wastes or 8 wastes, depending on how you define it, we've already mentioned. 5S, which is a workplace organization, housekeeping methodology, and mistake proofing are all tools in Lean Six Sigma. We want our tools to be easier to use, so they're more likely to you're more likely to use them. We want them. You want them, the concept of everyday carry with your tools, not this one time. I used this tool in this course, I'll never use it again. I want tools that you will use hopefully over and over and over again. So why do we even do a project charter? Well, we're going to come back to that in a second video. So stay tuned with that.